I've been struggling with my mental health since my late teens. And so for the past, 15 years or so, I've been going through quite a tumultuous journey of navigating that. And throughout that, I think I finally got to a place where I felt that I was doing a good job of managing my mental illness and I was content with the life that I was leading. That said, I was still experiencing deficits in my capacity and some difficult aspects of my illness impeding me from leading a life that I ideally would want. I thought, though, that I got to a pretty good place. But over the last 4 months, my world has kind of expanded in terms of my capacity opening up again to, places and capacities that I didn't think I would ever have again. I didn't think it was possible for me to regain capacity in various realms of my life. But following ketogenic therapy and using metabolic interventions has changed my life over the last 4 months. And of course, with this, there's a degree of celebration involved in that my life is changing for the better. I'm having increased capacity. I'm able to do things I didn't really think I would be able to do again. I'm able to show up in various facets of my life in ways that I want to. And that is an incredible thing and a really positive change. But the flip side of that is that it inevitably leads to falling into feelings or thoughts of, well, what would my life have been like if I had discovered this sooner? And that almost becomes a bit of a sad path or thought experiment to go down, where there are multiple ways that my life could have been very, very different had I known about or tried metabolic therapies earlier on in my journey navigating mental illness. I've shared several times on this channel my experience trying to navigate the education system in academia and trying to navigate a career path and having difficulties around that. And so perhaps that's the first kind of element of my life that I kind of want to do this thought experiment with, whereby, I struggled a great deal navigating university. Actually, even back to high school. High school is when I started to really struggle with my mental health. And I coped in very maladaptive ways, such as skipping school or receding from friends and family. And that was difficult. And it really only got more difficult as I progressed through my education experience. My first degree program, bachelor degree, was okay, but my second bachelor degree program took far longer than anticipated. It was really, really difficult. I've talked about it before on this channel, so I won't go too much into depth about what that experience was like, but my mental illness or my struggles with my mental health really made navigating the academic system incredibly challenging. And it was something, that I almost couldn't do in my bachelor degree program. I ended up finishing after 3 years, which what was supposed to be a 1-year program. But I attempted graduate programs twice now and had to withdraw both times because aspects of my mental illness, symptoms, negative symptoms, just made it too difficult to navigate those systems. And so, that leads me to the thought experiment of what if I had found the ketogenic diet, medical keto, in high school, and I never would have had to struggle through not having the capacity or having these cognitive deficits or difficulties with my mental health that impeded my ability to get the education that I wanted and to thus hopefully continue on to a career path that I wanted as well. The next kind of facet of life that could have been really, really different had I tried metabolic therapies earlier is around my relationships. And this one's a little difficult to talk about. I wasn't planning on crying, but this is really a difficult one to talk about because it has really, really impacted my life. Um, So I guess some context here. When I first started to struggle in high school, I mentioned that I started to recede from friends and family, and I was having a really just difficult time. And something that happened right after finishing grade 12, graduating high school, was that I lost my core group of girlfriends. And, the way it played out was that reason, basically silly reasons because we were immature 18-year-olds. But when reflecting on it, I think what really was the impetus for that loss of my friend group was the difficulties that I was experiencing with my mental health and how that was affecting our relationship. And so the reason why I bring that up is because that was kind of a big loss going into a really difficult stretch of my life where I was really, really struggling with my mental health, and not having that source of support was tough. But I did have a boyfriend throughout that period of my life. We had started dating in grade 12 and we dated for 7.5 years. And I think that's a relationship that I get a little bit emotional thinking about how things could have been different if I had found an effective treatment for my mental illness, such as metabolic therapy, earlier, because there's no doubt in my mind that my mental illness severely impacted that relationship for the worse and made it so that I couldn't really show up in a healthy way in that relationship, which ultimately led to the demise of that relationship. And just thinking back on how much pain and suffering were involved because of that is hard. And, even in my current relationship with my husband, Rob, we've been together for, I think, 6 years now, next week or a couple weeks from now. And it hurts a little bit to think about how I wasn't anticipating getting this emotional during this video, but it hurts a little bit to think about how much my mental illness has impacted our relationship over the last 6 years. And, we've still been able to cultivate a really beautiful, and I think for the most part, healthy and loving relationship that I'm so grateful for. But, thinking about if I keep repeating this, but if I had found metabolic therapies at the beginning of our relationship or before we met, and I didn't have all of the deficits or struggles that came along with having my mental illness, what would our relationship have looked like? How much better could it have been, or could it be? Or perhaps, to put it differently, how much pain and suffering could we have avoided? So obviously, by my emotional response to this topic, relationships is a difficult one to think about because there has been pain and suffering, not only for me, but the people that I'm in relationships with. And that is, I think, difficult to come to process, that could have been different. But, other facets of my life that could have been different was, I think back to there's like a decade of my life, which is basically my 20s, where I went through quite intense levels of despair and suffering. And I actually made 2 attempts on my life during that period as well. Yeah, it's painful to think that had I discovered this method of treatment before then, that suffering could have perhaps been avoided, or, going through endless trials of medication and treatment like ECT. None of those are fun to navigate. None of those were, the silver bullet that helped me. And so, yeah, if I could have avoided that, what would that have been like? And then just getting like really, really big picture, I mentioned that things really started to fall apart in high school, but for all of my youth, I dreamed of being an astronaut, and I excelled academically. I did really well, and it's a long shot to make a career like that happen, but it maybe could have happened, or some sort of career along those lines. And I had opportunities available to me that got kind of taken away because of my struggles with mental illness. I played competitive soccer and was on a team that would go to showcase tournaments in the United States where there were scouts there looking to recruit players for scholarships to major universities in the States. And I went to that in grade 11, but then I quit soccer because I was struggling so much in grade 12. And so the year that I would have been recruited, I no longer had that opportunity available to me. And so perhaps that shut some doors in terms of access to educational opportunities. And, not going to school probably played a role in terms of impeding educational paths or career paths that I could have gone after. And so, what if I could have caught it in grade 11 or 12 or whenever that started and treated my metabolic dysfunction? That was probably what was going on, and thus avoided struggling with a mental illness for the next decade and plus years. Now, all of this to say that, yeah, my life could have been a lot different, but I think it's also important to reflect on how perhaps it's transpired the way it should. And, what I mean by that is I reflected on the difficulties that my mental illness has brought into relationships like the one I have with my husband, Rob. But at the same time, we've kind of not used my mental illness, but reframed our understanding of it and created our careers around it, and working on using my experience to help others navigate their experience through this channel and our peer support community and whatnot. And so that's kind of a beautiful thing that's come from my mental illness being a part of our relationship. And, I've talked a lot on our channel about how my experience with the suffering I've endured or experienced with my mental illness has without a doubt increased my capacity for empathy and compassion. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. Another element of this kind of thought exercise that I'm going through right now is that someone who I was really close to during my period of intense struggle during my undergraduate degree recently said to me that, Lauren, I don't know if you would have been open or receptive if someone had suggested something like the medical keto diet to you during your periods of intense despair and anguish. And I think that got me thinking and empathizing a lot more with people who are responding to this project, saying things like, nope, the keto diet is not for me, or no, it's not accessible, or no, I can't do that. Because, yeah, I'm not sure how I would have responded to someone suggesting something like this to me during my darkest years, days, months, whatever. And I understand that I have experienced stretches of time, and there are many other people out there who are currently experiencing a stretch of time where it is difficult and painful just to keep living. And so suggesting lifestyle interventions that really do require a lot of energy and motivation and a certain degree of capacity probably feels like too big of an ask for some people who are in this stretch of time. But even if you do find yourself in a space like this at this moment, I really, really hope that an option like the keto diet and metabolic therapies or lifestyle changes like that do eventually become more accessible to you, and that you don't have to spend as long of a time in that period of anguish and despair as I did. I talk kind of endlessly on this channel about the idea of acceptance, and particularly self-acceptance and around your illness and whatnot. And that has been a crucial component of my journey navigating my mental illness and learning how to live well with it. And, I think that this skill of acceptance, or maybe the practice of working on acceptance, is a really important skill for anyone, regardless of who you are or if you have a mental illness or whatever, because suffering, the thing that we're kind of trying to come to accept, is such an inherent part of what it means to be human. No matter who you are, you're going to experience a degree of suffering at one point or another in your life. And so this practice of acceptance is a really good one. But I think where I'm kind of struggling right now is that, I spent a decade plus of my life working on accepting that I live with schizoaffective disorder and that my capacity is altered because of this, and that my life won't or can't look the way I once wanted it to or thought it could. And struggling with the fact that maybe I didn't need to accept that, because I'm now experiencing this treatment method that is addressing what was making my life so difficult as a result of my mental illness, reducing my symptoms, increasing my capacity, and kind of opening my life back up to, the possibility of living it the way I once imagined. I'm going down to Cape Canaveral next week to board the next space. No, I'm not going to become an astronaut or anything that I was talking about, but I just mean that because my capacity is increasing, it's opening up the breadth of possibility of what I can pursue going forward now from this point in my life, which is kind of incredible. And so I'm feeling kind of ecstatic and excited about how, like I said, my life is kind of opening up and my capacity is improving in ways that I never thought it could. And that feels really great. But at the same time, there is this part of me that is, I guess, grieving the fact that I didn't discover this sooner in my life. And, all these things that I just talked about could have looked a lot different. I am grappling with, maybe anger is not the right word, disappointment. I don't know, just that interventions like this are not being discussed at all in the field of mental health, or even just health as a whole, looking at treating things more holistically, looking at metabolic health and how it impacts a multitude of different diseases and illnesses, including major mental illnesses. And so, I'm sharing all of this, and I'm hoping that interventions like metabolic therapies and the medical ketogenic diet can become more commonplace and more accepted, so that hopefully other people will have access to trying them, and maybe their lives can be forever changed too. So I'm clearly navigating some emotions with this change in my life that I'm going through right now as a result of following the medical keto diet and metabolic therapies. And I guess thank you if you got to this point in the video. Thank you if you've been following along on this keto and metabolic health project. And I hope that you are able to find relief from any suffering you may be experiencing as well. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, wishing you and your loved ones good health. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.